This is into the traumatic brain injury kind of. For those who have not met me, I'm Arun, one of the senior clinical fellows working currently in UK at St. Thomas Hospital. So 2 years back, I did my EDIC exam after having a course, taking a course in Farz Academy. It was hugely helpful for me, and I've joined as a faculty now and will help you pass through as well. Fine. So how this is going to work is I expect you all to be interactive. At least you can answer in the comment, like whatever you think is the right option, you can put it in the comment, and then we can discuss if there is anything like you have any doubts, we can discuss that, or any coding theory behind that, we can discuss that. 45-year-old male is admitted to the ICU following severe traumatic brain injury with low GCS, and ICP pressure is being monitored.
So, as Saurav said, the answer is B. So basically, cerebral perfusion pressure is the difference of mean arterial pressure over your intracranial pressure. And based on all the guidelines, so this box just summarizes the uh, cerebral perfusion, the targets you aim for in elevated intracranial pressure situations. So the Brain Trauma Foundation gives the recommendation of cerebral perfusion pressure of 60 to 70. If you briefly look at like other recommendations, there are variable recommendations with respect to blood pressure. Like some of them ask for a map more than 80, some like age, based on the age, whether you aim for a systolic blood pressure more than 100, or in a particular age group like 15 to 49 and more than 70 years, they aim for a systolic blood pressure more than 110. And Association of Anesthetists guidelines says systolic blood pressure of 110 to 150, map of more than 90. So there is variable recommendations, but it depends on which guidelines they are asking about. But the cerebral perfusion pressure, the target is 60 to 70, which is uniform across the board. So let's remember that. Fine. Next question. So, in the management of a patient with severe traumatic brain injury, which of the following is level 1 recommendation from Brain Trauma Foundation guidelines? Prophylactic use of hyperventilation, aiming for PaCO2 less than 25 millimeters of mercury, administration of high dose barbiturates for all refractory intracranial hypertension, avoiding the use of corticosteroids to improve outcome or reduce ICP, routine use of hypothermia to improve outcomes, maintaining a serum sodium of more than 160 millimoles per liter. What do you think is the right answer? Nice. We have a few more answers. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes. So you're all correct. C is the only level 1 recommendation to avoid steroids, kind of a negative recommendation, but uh, yeah, that's the only which is class 1. Everything else is class 2 or class 3. Just like other guidelines, we don't have much class 1 recommendations in this area. Fine. Moving on. A patient with severe traumatic brain injury is being ventilated. So the ICU nurse suggests increasing the respiratory rate to lower the PCO2 like to 30 millimeters of mercury in an attempt to reduce an ICP. So what is the major risk of this strategy? Metabolic alkalosis, worsening hypoxemia, cerebral ischemia due to excessive vasoconstriction, increased cardiac output, hypernatremia. Oh, you are all well prepared, aren't you? Yes, cerebral ischemia due to excessive vasoconstriction. So that is correct. If you're an anesthetist and you have read the Miller's textbook of anesthesia, you might remember this box where it clearly explains the relationship between partial pressure of oxygen, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, and mean arterial pressure to that of cerebral blood flow. So as you can see in the carbon dioxide curve, if it goes below a certain point, the cerebral blood flow as well decreases, and beyond a certain range, it plateaus quite rapidly. So, although it's a temporary measures, there is risk of cerebral hypoperfusion and ischemia if you keep reducing PCO2. That's why it's not recommended to keep PCO2 low in a um, more than few hours or so. It's just a temporizing measure, and that's the same reason why you don't vary the PCO2 range extremely. If even if the patient is hypercarbic, if you're trying to reduce it gradually. Don't try to hyperventilate so fast, and it may cause cerebral hypoperfusion as well. Even whether the intracranial pressure increased or not, irrespective of that, be gradual when you fluctuate the PCO2. All right. So patient with traumatic brain injury develops polyuria, more than 200 mils per hour of dilute urine, and rising sodium and osmolality. So, what is the diagnosis? This is most consistent with, yeah, what do the others think? So, we have got someone saying cerebral salt wasting, someone saying diabetes insipidus. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Come on, guys, it's not that difficult. Make a guess. So, we have a different opinions on this answer. So, the correct answer is diabetes insipidus. So let's discuss this a bit more. So this patient is having rising serum sodium, which is hypernatremia. So this is the kind of picture you often see in a brain dead patient. They go into like a diabetes insipidus state, wherein they are retaining they are losing a lot of free water, and their sodium gets like keeps increasing. So we treat it by giving desmopressin or giving free water enterally or dextrose through intravenous replacement to maintain the sodium level. It has its significance, especially around when we are like deciding to declare them as brain death. It has to be like below a certain range before you can say them as brain dead. So the same mechanism happens in traumatic brain injury as well. With respect to the other answers, which some of you have said, so they cause hyponatremia rather than hypernatremia. So hypo, the sodium level drops because of excessive ADH in the case of SIADH, and cerebral salt wasting can happen in traumatic brain injury as well. Can anyone say how to differentiate between SAADH and cerebral salt wasting? Yeah. So Paul says hydration status. So which patient is euvolemic? Which one is hypovolemic? Yeah, you're correct. So SADH patients are often euvolemic. Cerebral salt wasting, in the other end, it's hypovolemic. It's difficult to differentiate volume status unless it's like quite obvious, but this is how we differentiate. And urine electrolytes also make a help based on different cutoffs. So yeah, basic thing is diabetes insipidus is a cause for hypernatremia, whereas the other two options cause hyponatremia. So that's the main reason we have selected diaphragm insipidus.